Was politics, you running for office in particular, was that always the plan?
No. Okay, now some people will say, Ayanna, that's not true because, look, all right. Uh, in high school, well, I was class president from seventh grade all the way to 12th grade, and I was a competitive debater
Damn,
and a
7th through
Midwest
12th.
champion. Yes, now, listen, I don't think that's because there was anything extraordinary about me. I think I was the only one that kept raising my hand, and I was probably the loudest, maybe occasionally a little eloquent too. But yes, so, I was student government president, I was class president, co-captain of my cheerleading squad. I had those sort of conventional resume things, I guess, that one would anticipate if someone aspired to run for office. And in fact, in high school, I was voted most likely to be the mayor of Chicago. And in my youthful arrogance, I was upset because that did not seem a high enough bar. But that being said, I loved being an aide. I loved being behind the person. And I think it's so important that people not define civic engagement and the work of politics just by casting a ballot or having your name on a ballot. There are so many rewarding, meaningful, impactful roles to be the person behind the person. I pay attention to how people treat my staff, who I see as not working for me, but working with me. But people often treat them as invisible. And they don't understand the power of an aide. They're the ones pulling the elbow of a member. They're the ones whispering in their ear, heading into an interview or a vote. They're the ones amplifying an issue that they heard in a constituent meeting. I mean, I do make it a point to be proximate to the pain, because I believe the people closest to the pain should be the closest to the power, driving and informing the policymaking. But I could not do anything were it not for this brilliant, dedicated, personally sacrificing staff that I have. And I know that because I did that work too. And I found such reward and meaning and purpose at being the person behind the person, and was very content with that. And what happened is that I had been doing the work of trying to actualize leadership parity in the city of Boston, a city that many would define as very progressive, and a state they would define as very progressive, a blue state, leaders in healthcare reform, marriage equality, but very behind when it comes to leadership parity and representation at that time. When I was first recruited to run. So I had been doing the work of pipeline building and recruitment so that we could have a government at every level that was reflective and representative of the people, not for kumbaya, not for benevolence, not to say how progressive we are, but because you can't advance policies through a monolithic and homogenized prism. Policy is my love language. So I always knew that in order for us to have policies that did the work of healing, of justice, of equity, we needed to have policymakers that were reflective and representative. And so while I was doing that work in the nonprofit world and other ways, while an aide for a United States senator, someone came to me and said, you need to run for the Boston City Council. There's never been a woman of color elected to this body. This is going to be the year. Here's all the data that shows the trends. And I said, hell no. I'm very happy being the person behind the person. I have no designs on doing that. Finally, I decided that it was extension of a lifetime of work. And I ran, I can't even say it's a platform because it's really my heart's work. So it feels wrong to call it this, but I ran on a platform of saving our girls. And I said girls that didn't even know they needed saving. I felt there had been such a disproportionate emphasis on how at and proven risk Black and brown boys are. And that here Black and brown girls were growing up in the same conditions and our stories weren't being told. And I wanted to champion gender specific and responsive programming and policies because I was giving my phone number to every young girl that I was mentoring as a big sister or in doing the work of advancing the safety, development, and wellness of girls. And it wasn't sustainable. And I said, the fact that this isn't sustainable demonstrates this is something systemic going on. And I'm going to tell you this, Jemele, when I first came out with that platform, I'm running to save our girls, many people said that's the work of the nonprofit community, not government. And there were many, a gatekeeper, including in my home community, Black folks, who said, but it's the boys that are dying. And I said, well, this is not the oppression Olympics. The boys are dying. That is true. And the girls are slowly dying in front of you. And no one is creating space for their voices. I don't want to be their voice. I want to create space for their voices to be heard. And so, fortunately, an entire city believed that that was a worthy agenda. And so I did in 2009 become the first woman of color, first Black woman to serve on that Boston City Council, breaking that concrete ceiling, because that's what we say Black women do. We don't break glass ceilings, breaking that concrete ceiling. And I'm very proud to say that today in 2023, that city council is now majority people of color and majority women of color. And 3 of them have gone on to now be our mayor, our attorney general, and a state senator.
So when the teacher left the class, you were definitely the student that got put in charge of the class when she left.
That is true. Oh
I knew it. I knew it.
Wait a minute though. But why are you saying that? Because I said too much. Because I said
no.
Too much.
I'm saying that because there's a very clear through line of leadership that you've always gone for. It's by no mistake that you have been class president, that you were class president basically your entire, formal schooling. And then you were like, oh, yes, I was captain of my cheerleading team. And I was like, there's a very clear through line that leadership was in your blood. And so I was like, oh, yeah, she was definitely the one that got left in charge when the teacher left the room, because they knew that they would be straight. It's a compliment, Congresswoman. It truly is a compliment.
Thank you. But I do want to say, though, like so many of us, because I think the dichotomy of representing any marginalized community, and I can only speak to mine because I've been Black and female my whole life. But, being Black and being a woman, that we have this sort of dichotomy of being hyper visible, where everything about us is policed and criminalized and subject to scrutiny, but also hyper invisible. And so I feel that I was living that very early on. So I was in a school on scholarship, in the minority in every way. My father was battling substance use disorder, in and out of the criminal legal system. I'm a survivor of a near decade of childhood sexual abuse. I was being raised alone by my mom. So there were a lot of destabilizing factors in our household. Hardship does not discriminate. But for a while, I thought our family was kind of marked. And it's because I didn't understand that we were living in the residual aftermath of what I would characterize as policy violence. I thought that we literally just had a mark on us. And so once I made that connection, it really shifted a lot of things for me in terms of the work that I wanted to do. So I guess what I'm saying is, I know I did these leadership things, these conventional things as you would expect someone to do that's now a member of Congress, but there are so many reasons why that should not have been my path. Why things could have gone very left. I lived in the school nurse's office. I was a frequent flyer, and I was there because it was a place of refuge and a safe space for me. I wasn't one of those kids that acted out. I was a kid that shut down. And so, I think it's those experiences and those destabilizing factors in our household that I soon came to understand were really systemic and shared struggles by many Black folks and other marginalized people because of policies, like the war on drugs, like redlining, all of these different things. And so that's when I really got very into policy and wanting to do work from that aspect. And I did get the clarity very early. I do have to concede that is true, probably around 12. So I always knew that I wanted to be in the struggle and do the work of liberation. My parents placed that expectation on me. My mother did not read me bedtime stories of princes saving me. She read me the speeches of Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm. And she told me to be Black is a beautiful thing and something to be proud of, but you're being born into a struggle. And I have an expectation you're going to do your part in that struggle in the work of liberation for Black people and all marginalized people. So I think I had the visibility of leadership, but there was an invisibility because I was really struggling. And a lot of my peers didn't know anything about that and couldn't relate to those things because I was in the minority in every single way in my school.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. And I relate to everything you said because I'm the child of parents who also struggle with substance abuse. And my father had a heroin addiction, much like your father, I think, also had a heroin addiction. And there was a variety of different drugs that my mother certainly experimented with. And was on, as she was unfortunately the victim of some very deep childhood trauma, sexual abuse. She was violently raped when I was about 6 or 7 years old. So there's a lot there that you said that I very much relate to. And what I have found in just, doing some research into the behaviors of children of addicts is that people would be surprised, but the number one quality and trait that psychologists say that we have is that we are control freaks. And I mean this in a positive way, and that we are and often overachievers because we grew up in such a destabilizing way that what we crave is the stability, and we will do everything possible to create that stability that we did not have when we were growing up. So I am not at all surprised at your path of leadership. I was captain of my softball team. I was probably too much of a knucklehead to run for class president, but not totally a knucklehead, but I've always found myself drawn to leadership like positions. And I think it has a lot to do with that sort of control factor. Like when you grow up and nothing is in your control, it's the one thing that you seek that once you become an adult. And yes, you can pay me a couple bucks for that armchair psychology.
That was better than Ayanna. Do you want to hit me with an invoice?
I got you.
But I would say, first of all, I want to hold space for that. Just because we tell our stories all the time doesn't mean that it isn't hard. So I thank you for sharing that. I want to hold space for that, and also say that I think it's one of the reasons why you're such an effective storyteller. You're a true empath. I just thank you for stewarding your gift in such a righteous way.